welcome to Unit 3, where our main focus is going to be about energy, how we make it, how we use it, how we get it. So the first concept that we're going to be talking about is specifically ATP itself. So ATP, we know that our body needs energy to run our cells, but our body cannot directly use the food that you get from energy. But your energy from your food can be used because the energy is stored in chemical bonds in that food that you eat. So I have to convert this energy into a form that my body can directly use, and I have to break the bonds that's storing those energies and create new bonds. Once my energy is converted into a more usable form, ATP carries it to be used for cell functions. So overall, ATP is an energy-carrying molecule that carries and stores energy for our cellular functions. It is the main energy currency for the cell. So where you take in food and you eat glucose, like carbohydrates and lipids that contain calories that I'm going to be using for energy, our body's going to take those, convert them into ATP so that our body can use that energy. Looking at ATP in the structure, it's made up of three components. There's a nitrogen base, which is adenine, and that is this green section here. We have a sugar ring of ribose, and that is this blue section here. And then we have three phosphate groups that is at the end that is held together with high energy bonds. So ATP stands for Adenosine Triphosphate. Tri means three, so that is why we have three phosphates. Adenosine is adenine plus ribose, adenosine. So we go through this cycle where we have ATP and we use energy from it, and then we have ADP, and then we need to create ATP back again. So a lot of energy is stored in the bond between the last two phosphates. So right here, between these last two phosphates, there's a lot of energy in this bond. Energy is released whenever that third phosphate group is broken off and then added to another molecule. That creates ADP. ADP stands for adenosine diphosphate. So di means two. When the third phosphate breaks off, I now have two, ADP. But I want to recycle ADP, so I have to add on a third phosphate again to go from 2 ADP diphosphate to 3 ATP triphosphate. So that cycle looks like this. I have ATP triphosphate 1, 2, 3, ADP diphosphate 1, 2. Whenever this third phosphate breaks off, it releases energy for our cells to use. And so then I have two phosphates. I need to add on a phosphate, and I do that by adding in energy from broken down food to stick that third phosphate back on to create ATP. This is a chemiosmotic process. So chemiosmosis is when you have the movement of ions down a concentration gradient. And specifically, there's an enzyme called ATP synthase. So remember, synthesis means to make. Anything that ends in ase is going to be an enzyme. So this is an enzyme that specifically makes ATP. So enzyme ATP synthase is used to add the third phosphate back to ADP to make ATP using the energy that you eat. So once again, a summary of this. When ATP is broken down, it releases energy for the cell to use and becomes ADP, and then you have that phosphate that was broken off. So in a chemical formula type situation, you have ATP equals ADP plus a phosphate, which is the P, plus the released energy. Because more energy is given off than required, this is an overall exothermic reaction. So remember, exo means outside, so therm is energy, specifically heat energy. So this is where energy is being released outside of the molecule. To make ATP, cells have to take ADP and join together that ADP in a phosphate, and I use energy from food to do this. So chemical formula-wise, I have ADP, I have that free phosphate, the P, and then I have to add energy to stick the phosphate on to make ATP. And because energy is taken in, because it takes a lot of energy to attach the third phosphate, that is going to be an endothermic reaction. So endo means in, has to take in energy, endothermic. But where does that energy come from? So like we said, it comes from the macromolecules in your food. So remember, you get energy from carbohydrates, lipids, which are fats, and proteins. So carbohydrates are the most commonly broken down for ATP. If you remember, they're used first for energy. I can get up to around 36 ATP from a single glucose molecule that I consume. And if you remember, carbohydrates store 4 calories per gram of energy. Lipids is what I use second once I run out of carbohydrates for energy. And these store 9 calories per gram of energy. And then proteins are the least likely to be broken down for energy because remember they do so many other things, so I really want to save those for last if I have to. And these store 4 calories per gram of energy.